Good morning, everybody. Lovely to see so many of you here. We've got the numbers ticking up a little bit as we watch. We'll give everybody 30 more seconds and then we'll get cracked in because I know how busy all of your time is. So we've got people joining on Teams. We've got 30 odd people there. We've got some people on Facebook Live. There's about the same amount there. We've got about 150 registered. So it goes to show something that a lot of people have challenges with. So give us a few minutes. If I could get any thumbs up, waves, anything in the chat, just so I know you can hear me and see me. Perfect. Thank you so much. Excellent. Okay. Well, let's get straight in. You're always welcome through the whole thing to chuck stuff in the chat box. I might not respond to it until the end, depending on how very pertinent it is. But if you've got any questions, feel free to chuck it in there. Just forgive me that I'm kind of looking at two different places. So if it looks like I'm distracted, it's because I'm trying to stare you both in the face. So good morning, everybody, and welcome and thank you for joining us. I know it's not morning for everybody. Please forgive that I'm in a much more echoey place than I would normally be, and I don't have my normal tech. I woke up this morning and of course my internet's down, so I very hurriedly raced away to my actual office, but my actual office doesn't have any beautiful backgrounds or nice branded stuff, and it's got mediocre acoustics for such things. So my sincere apologies, but hopefully you can still hear me, and realistically all of the fancy things in the world don't make up for the content is what you're here for anyway. So let's crack straight in. I wanted to talk today about difficult conversations, particularly for those in healthcare leadership, veterinary leadership, because as a general rule, a lot of us are so well trained to do our clinical jobs and to be really good at what we do clinically. And then we're just expected to know this stuff. We end up in leadership roles, we end up in positions where we are the people who are meant to have these conversations, and nobody really tells us how. There's all these kind of nice cliches floating around about having the courage to do it. But at the end of the day, the only way to get better at this crap is by doing it a lot. And that is something that most of us kind of either avoid if we can, or we fumble our way through it in such a blur of adrenaline and terror that we don't really learn that much from it because we can't really remember half of what happened afterwards. So this is to try to give a little bit of structure, a little bit of courage, and really just kind of set you up for success the next time you have to have one of the billion difficult conversations that you probably have to have this year. So we're going to talk through some key principles. That's really about boosting your confidence to do so, as much as anything else. So yep, there's a couple of cliches in there, but they're really focused on trying to take some of the pressure off, I think, is really my approach to this, is take some of the drama out of it, make it less scary, and actually give us the courage to just move forward and just do something, because as most of us probably know, saying nothing is often the worst thing. I also want to do a section on what I call holding the line, which, as you'll see as we go through, is something that I'm really passionate about, which basically is around when people, you've had this great conversation and you've, said all of the stuff you needed to say, but then they have excuses, they're going to blame something else, they're going to make it about the training, they're going to make it about the policy's bad anyway, we shouldn't be doing that. Or maybe they make it about you as a leader and, it's because, you do X, Y, Z. Or maybe they cry, or maybe they get overwhelmed. So we're going to touch a lot on one of the reasons when I'm coaching leaders, when I see where they fall down, is they had a good plan. They actually had the conversation quite well because they went in with prepared for their speech and they, did their bit. But then it all goes to hell afterwards because the person argy-bargies, and then you spend 90 minutes of a 30-minute conversation actually kind of justifying yourself or having to, have this conversation about the why, and effectively you lose all of the message that you were trying to have. Then we'll get cracked into an actual how to have the conversation. Here's a structure. Here's the 5 steps. Now, that section is actually quite small part of today, because I hope once we've done those first two, you might see that the third one isn't quite as serious as you think it might need to be. And then very quickly, in 2 minutes at the end, if you need any more help with some of this sort of stuff, I'll let you know how you could. Who am I? Do I have a clue what I'm talking about? Should you listen to me about this stuff? Well, probably not, but I'm here and you're here, so let's do it anyway. My background is actually as a veterinarian, so some of you, I know some pretty familiar names here today. I can see quite a few who have worked with me and have done a lot of leadership roles in the veterinary space in large specialist hospitals, in major RSPCAs, Taronga Zoo as the manager of wildlife health and welfare, all sorts of different places around the country. And then I kind of realized, actually, it turns out that a lot of the stuff that we're dealing with in the veterinary industry is exactly the same in the healthcare industry. And so I've started working a lot more in the space where actually we have a lot of crossover, a lot of the stuff about making leadership sustainable, around leading in emotionally charged situations where there's ethical shades of grey and there's no right thing to do, and around burnout and, challenge of our staff, where well-being is this really important hallmark of what we have to do, but we also need to get jobs done and we need to be financially viable. And those things, that line and trying to work those two areas is pretty similar. So now effectively I do Unleash coaching and consulting, which is aiming to keep leaders leading. Really want to make particularly middle management and owning small practices much more sustainable than it's feeling right now, and help people actually enjoy their jobs again, and leadership to be something that people aspire to again rather than avoid at all costs because it looks way too hard for not enough money. I'm also dog mum to this little nearly 13-year-old mixed breed rescue mongrel, and I'm a solo mum by choice to this little critter too. And I say those things mostly because I think it's important for leaders to get to be humans as well. We bring our full selves to work. We bring all of the challenges that we're facing at home to our workplace, and we bring all of our workplace challenges home to those that are supporting us there. So I don't think it's reasonable to expect leaders to be one thing in the building and one thing not, because the myth of work-life balance, the way that the world is going right now, our work is far and away encroaching into our personal lives, and we need to make sure that that balance piece actually just becomes integration piece, and that if work is going to be a normal part of our home lives, how do we also take some of that back and get that flexibility in both directions? Anyway, enough about me. That's not what you're here to talk about. So, key principles. Good old Brene Brown. Most of you have probably heard of her. Most of you female leaders in the room might have read a little bit of her. Effectively, she's all about leading in an authentic and vulnerable way. But one of my favorite parts of her work is the concept of clear as kind. And as people who are generally, to stereotype, highly compassionate and highly empathetic, we have a really terrible habit of trying to be nice about what we're saying and softening the blow to such a degree that we actually take away what we're trying to say. So who here, when they had their last difficult conversation, said things like, oh, it would be great if you could just, or perhaps a little improvement on, or, maybe just a little bit more effort at. There's lots of maybes, there's lots of please could you, or have you thought about, or what would it look like to? And while I understand what we're trying to do, we're trying to be kind, both for our comfort level, but also because we care about the person. We don't want to overwhelm them and just be like, do this because I said so. But the problem is, by softening our language and being very gentle, I guess, we lose a lot of the clarity of our point. So particularly when you're having conversation about things that are ambiguous anyway. So, it's much easier when you're talking about like a clinical thing that they've messed up. There's a right and a wrong. Please do it this way. This is the way we do it. This is our policy, right? You can be nice about that because it's so finite what they have to change. But I find when I'm coaching leaders, most of the challenges they're having is not technical skills, there's a yes or a no. It's things like behaviors or leadership or initiative, stuff that's already quite ambiguous. And if we try to take ambiguous, slightly subjective things that we're trying to have difficult conversations about, and then we add more ambiguity by saying it nicey, the clarity is lost. And the person often works out at best going, oh, cool, I'm fine. Like, whatever. It was just an informal chat. Nobody really cares. When what you really intended was to let them know, no, this has to change. But at worst, they can also walk all over you. And that's when they can start pulling out all of those deflections and those derailments because they can see that you're fumbling a little bit. All right. So while our temptation is to be kind, the example I'd like to use, as you can see in the picture, for those who are watching along, not listening along, is lady in front of you walks out of the bathroom with toilet paper on her shoe. Yeah, look, it's awkward. Everybody feels awkward when you tell her that there's toilet paper. She feels like an idiot. You feel embarrassed. You're flushed too. But it was the right thing to do, right? But if you said to her something like, oh, hey, perhaps you should just check your wardrobe, or, oh, hey, look down. Firstly, you're still embarrassing yourself. You're still making her feel weird and awkward, and she might not actually work out what the problem is. So simply tapping her on the shoulder and saying, you have toilet paper on your shoe, is actually the nicest thing to do here. And the same is true when we're having difficult conversations. You can beat around the bush all you want, but all you do is lose the clarity of your message, and you still both end up uncomfortable either way. So why not end up uncomfortable and get the point across? So that is the key principle number one. All right. Key principle number two is they're not actually as hard as you think they are. Ignoring the part about the derailments and deflections, which we'll get to in a second, most difficult conversations aren't that difficult. They're just awkward. You feel awkward, they feel awkward, everybody feels awkward, but it's over soon. And for most of us, and for most people I work with, they spend so much more energy and angst stressing about this thing, putting it off, wondering what they're going to say, planning their speech, dreading it. And then it happens, and they're just like, oh, yeah, okay, that's done now. It's 10 minutes of my life. So just do it. Remember that the most painful part of these is the dreading them. So if you're somebody who's been putting it off and putting it off because every time it comes up, you're like, oh no, I have to think about what to say. Oh no, it's going to go badly. Oh, just do it. Okay. Because the worst part of it is that part now. Actually doing it, even if it's awkward as hell, it's usually just 10 to 15 minutes of awkward and then it's done. And you can all move on. Okay. But until you actually do something, nobody's moving anywhere. So they're not that difficult. They're just weird. We just all feel uncomfortable. And that's life as a leader. Principle number three, and this is a big one, guys. Courage is a skill, not a feeling. You get more of it by using more of it. It's like any muscle that we grow. All of those cliches about how resilience is like this, courage is like this too. I hate to say it, but there is no one out there who loves this stuff. There is only weird masochistic people that probably shouldn't be leaders. Like, oh yeah, I can't wait to tell this person they suck at their job. Like, it's just not actually a thing that people are out there doing. Nobody goes into leadership excited about telling people off or having performance conversations or pulling people up on bad behavior. The only reason that some of us have stopped being scared of them is because we've done lots of them. So unfortunately, yep, there is a segment of personality that is more or less conflict avoidant. Okay. And so some of us, the hurdle to get over the first few times is higher. But there is a strong correlation between people who are highly conflict avoidant and the people who most want to be kind and most want to do the right thing by people. So guess what? If you want to do the right thing by people and be the kindest person you can be, conflict's the nicest way to do it. So yes, there is a small segment of personality which makes the initial hurdle harder, but for everything beyond that, the only way to get better at this stuff is to do it a bunch of times. Because I used to be just like you, and I used to dread this, and my adrenaline, and I would be barely sleep the night before a difficult conversation. You know, my mouth would go dry during it. I'd get the tremors. And now I've kind of done so many that it's not necessarily about I've been desensitized to them, but I've done enough now to see most of the derailments and most of the deflections and most of the tears. I've certainly been in a performance review where a chair was thrown through a window. Like, I've had almost all of the outcomes you can have, and I know that I can handle them. I know that it's just reactions. I know that it is just people's defense mechanisms, to people's defense mechanisms, and it's not personal. And so the only way to get to the point where you feel like that is by doing a bunch of them. And I'm sorry to tell you that, but it is the harsh reality of having awkward conversations is you just got to do them to get any good at them and for them to be less terrifying. And this is one of the key core principles. We're going to spend a bit of time on this, okay? Having an awkward conversation, whether you're doing performance, whether you're calling someone out, whether you're telling them that, you know, they need to up their game, or even something much more awkward, like you thinking that redundancies or restructures might be on the board, you know, where you really have to tell them something hard. Again, most of us are so fixated on trying to be nice that with all of the argy-bargy and all of the upset and all of their uncomfortable emotions, we feel like we need to win the conversation. We feel like we need to explain, to justify, to tell them that we're right, to, you know, we kind of, this becomes this back and forth conversation, argy-bargy about, am I right? Are they right? Is their reason a good enough reason? Is that excuse? Oh no, but but then I'm going to talk about this thing over here. And we spend so much of our time and energy in a conversation winning, defending, that again, the clarity gets lost. So, key point that I cannot stress enough, you do not have to win. You just have to hold the line. This is especially true if you are in a formal leadership position. If you are in an informal leadership position and you're trying to have difficult conversations with sideways or upwards, there's a little more nuance to it. But almost without exception, when you are in a position of actual, you know, supervision over somebody, you don't have to win. All right. So what that looks like, an example of that is, okay, sorry, mate, we need to talk about your, you know, you're not meeting expectations on your filling out your paperwork. Oh, but there's too much paperwork. Oh, yes, I understand that there's a lot of paperwork. Here's why it's important. Oh, yeah, but I don't really have time. Oh, look, I know. Let's talk about your resourcing. Let's talk about how we can find you more work. Oh, no, but I shouldn't have to do that much because such and such doesn't do hers any better than me. Oh, yes, but that's, you know, blah, blah, blah. It's just this back and forth, back and forth. And we lose the message. Remember at the beginning, clear is kind. And by the end of a 60-minute conversation where you've felt to the need to defend every argument they have, where is the clarity? Can either of you even remember what you were talking about now? Because a lot of the time they walk out of that conversation at best feeling like they don't really remember what the point was in the first place. But most of the time, at worst, they walk out going, oh, yeah, you know, now she's going to change the policy. You know, they won. So as soon as you start trying to defend your position, they feel the need to defend their position. As long as you are trying to win, they are trying to win. So instead, we have to reframe our approach, which is, this is the expectation that I'm holding, and I'm simply holding that line, no matter what else comes up. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't invite their perspective, all right? And when we get to the structure part, I'll talk about how we do that, okay, in a way that is still holding a line, but inviting their perspectives, all right? But We're simply going, this is my expectation. That's holding. Kind of no matter what else comes up in this conversation. All right. So let's show some examples of that. Those that can see the slides, I'll let you have a read of a couple. Those that are listening along, we're talking about things that go, I hear you, but that's not what we're talking about today. That is the key crux of what we're talking about. Okay. So I hear that you're frustrated. I'm happy to talk about that, but the expectation is the same. Or I'm happy for you to talk to me about the fact that you don't think the policy is any good. Why don't you book a time with me to do that? Today's conversation is about. Or I'd love to hear your thoughts on what's wrong with the training and how we can do that better. Let's book a meeting for that. Let's raise it in the next team meeting. Why don't you go and solicit the ideas of your colleagues? But today we're talking about the expectation. All right. So what we're doing is we're effectively validating that they've got reasons that they want to talk about. We're going to go, yep, I hear you. I see you. Your opinion is important. Okay. Because psychological safety, we have to be able to hear feedback and not be defensive about it. So we have to go, yeah, all right, I'm willing to talk about that. It's just not what we're talking about today. So you do not let your conversation go off track. All right. And I've been in some awkward conversations where I've had to repeat, yeah, great point, but that's not what we're talking about today, at least 20 times because the person was not willing to hear it. But at the end of the conversation, I knew that she was walking out the door and the only thing that was left in her head was, yep, but here's what we've talked about today. All right. Now, there is a nuance on this one, of course, and many of you might be silently dreading the people getting distressed during a conversation, right? This is a real challenge. There is no doubt that people becoming overwhelmed, a little bit of tears is normal, but obviously some people are much more distressed than that. And firstly, I want to be clear, that's not their fault, okay? The vast proportion of them are not putting it on or faking it. And even if, let's generalize and perhaps say that there is a difference in generational likelihood of this happening, remember that the only way that we learn that I can cope with feedback and I can cope with rejection and I can cope with not being as good as I thought I was at stuff is to practice having that feedback, having the rejection, having that I didn't win, I'm not the best at this. And I'm afraid to say, yes, we're generalizing. I'm sorry if this offends anybody. But the truth is that younger generations often haven't had the practice at living through those hard conversations. They don't know yet that they will be fine and that they will come out the other end of this. So whilst there's some of us that are of a different ilk or a different generation feel like they're just being a bit soft, the truth is they didn't get the opportunity to practice these small disappointments and small hurts when they were younger. And that's actually not their fault. So we do have to have some compassion for the fact that they are learning a skill in the workplace that they possibly should have learned in middle school. All right, but they haven't, and that's not on them. So all we have to do is help them see the same things that their parents should be teaching them. You will get through this. I know this hurts. I see you. I care, but you're going to be okay. Right? So how do we move forward with a conversation and hold the line if somebody is crying or distressed? The first thing is if it's just tears, if it's just, upset, then it's actually quite simple to just offer them breaks, offer them a cup of tea, offer them a drink of water. Is there anything I can offer you? Is there anything I can do to support you? Because you want to be able to file note that you offered them a rest, that you offered them more support. Okay. And then if we get to a point that they are quite overwhelmed, it's clear that they are becoming distressed more than stressed, and that this conversation is clearly not going to be productive anymore, and you're actually at risk for tipping them over the line, that's where we can hold the line by saying, without a doubt, being clear, we're still having this conversation. but I'm willing to do whatever you need to support you. Okay. So where this happens, I would say something like, okay, I can see that you're really upset and I care about you and I don't want to, put you through more of this right now. So let's end this here. I'm going to take you to the tea room to make you a cup of tea, or I'm going to get somebody who I know is to be a good friends with you and you guys can go out, be a lunch break together. I'm going to book another meeting for the two of us tomorrow. And at that meeting tomorrow, I'm not going to talk about any of this. We're just going to talk about how I can best support you and what we can put in place to make it more comfortable for you when we come back to this conversation. Right. So what you're doing is saying, without a doubt, we're coming back to this conversation. I am holding this line, but I want to do whatever you request that is reasonable, obviously, to facilitate your comfort during that. All right. So tomorrow we're going to have no pressure. We're not going to raise any of this stuff again. We're not going to talk about the performance thing again. Tomorrow, all we're going to talk about is what you need to get through us. Maybe you need a day off. Maybe we need to do it last thing in the day so you can go straight home. Maybe you need to have a support person in the room. Maybe, whatever that looks like for you. So you're being really clear. I support you. I'm here to do what you need, but we're still having this conversation. Okay. Because the thing to be aware of, whether we're talking about the people getting distressed or whether we're talking about the people who are deflecting and derailing and using all sorts of excuses, they're not even consciously choosing to do it. All right. The tears, sometimes we feel like it is, but most of the time it's not. But even with the ones where it feels like they're just being a right pain in the ass, where they're just making excuses willy-nilly, where they're just clearly deflecting, they're not even consciously choosing that most of the time. Most of the time, this is just a normal human reaction to discomfort. Being uncomfortable, our human brain goes, change the topic. Must be. And they just throw stuff around. It's just human responsiveness to, I feel uncomfortable and I've got to get out of this feeling. They're not doing it on purpose. The challenge that we have in our modern workplaces, where we've got such a push towards psychological safety, is that we have lost the understanding, we and mostly team members have lost the understanding between the difference between psychological safety and discomfort. And a lot of people confuse uncomfortable with unsafe. And this is why it's so important for you to be in a position to go, I will support you. I will help you. You are safe. I will hear your feedback. I will not get defensive. I can still hold you accountable, though, even if that makes you uncomfortable. Make sense? Help clarify? Is anybody out there going, oh, yep. Okay, now I see where a lot of my conversations have gone wrong. Cool. All right. So that's the kind of key principles, right? The hold the line stuff is really what I would stress to come back to as often as you can. And if you want to screenshot this, you're very welcome to, obviously. Just having some of these lines on the back burner so that you can pull them out. But cracking into the actual process. Oops. Oh, hang on. Sorry, I was just going to do, which one do you use? Which type of difficult conversation? When do you just have a chat? When do you do coaching? When do you do a formal warning? When do you do a performance improvement plan? I do just want to spend one slide on this. It's only 2 minutes, just because actually this is one of the biggest questions I get that is so simple in theory, but people have lost the kind of clarity on when should I be using a performance improvement plan, when should I be giving a formal warning, etc. Because we feel like we have to give people so many chances and everybody has to be so safe. So when should you have a chat? Hey, are you okay? I noticed this is happening. Doesn't seem like you. All right. That's basically when you should be having a chat. When this isn't out of character behavior, when this happened and it was unexpected, this person is normally a high performer or this person is normally positive and suddenly they're being a bit of a twit or maybe they've missed something. Most of the time for a technical mistake or even somebody being a bit rude or snarky, if this is a one-off for them, I would just be having a chat. Hey, are you all right? Simple as, I noticed this, anything I can do to support. You're kind of making it clear, I noticed this, which means you can't actually do this in the workplace, but you don't need to jump down their throat first time out of character for this person. Coaching is when it is becoming in character, all right, but it's something that's more of a technical issue, all right? So keep not doing, maybe they're a bit slow, maybe they're late on consults, maybe they, keep just needing help with catheters, maybe the things are messy, whatever that looks like. Where it's not super serious, where it's usually a kind of skill that they can easily learn, and importantly here, where they show the desire to change. And that's usually for me the easiest differentiation between whether it's a coaching conversation or whether I'm going to escalate it to a PIP, is whether this person seems to want what I have to say. Because if they're like eating it up, going, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Yes, can you help me? Yes, could somebody mentor me? Yes, I'll take that extra training, please. I'll coach them to the cows come home. If they want to grow and learn and develop, there's no point in escalating it to something formal because it's not going to change their likelihood of wanting to do the work. It's just going to disengage them and make them feel a bit deflated. So I will stick with coaching pretty much if it's harmless. It's a technical mistake, but it's not going to get anybody killed, and they want to change. Performance improvement plan is kind of the next step. They clearly don't want to change, or they don't understand, or they're just not listening to you, or where it's something that is actually harmful to potentially to patients or to others. So, rude behaviors, for example, where you've given them their chat, you've said, hey, that was a bit off. What was that about? And they're keeping doing it. I would be progressing that quite quickly to a PEP. If you're going to treat other people like that, that's not fair on the people around you. Or if you're going to continue to do something that compromises patient safety, slack off on your sterility, those sorts of things, and the person just isn't really getting that matters, or they aren't somebody who is interested in learning what you have to say, I'd move that to a PIP. Formal warning, on the other hand, I would use a lot for what I call moral mistakes, okay? Technical versus moral mistakes. So where somebody has lied, somebody has taken the lazy route because they were lazy, somebody has obviously stolen, somebody has done something, all of the things that in many circumstances would be illegal. So anything that looks like bullying, anything that looks like harassment, anything that looks like a racist joke, where we're talking about things that they should just know, okay, that this is a societal expectation of you to not be sexist in the workplace or tap somebody on the butt. That's not a performance improvement plan, okay? You shouldn't, as their employer, have to teach them general morals that society can expect. So if somebody was to do those sorts of things, for me, that would move straight to a formal warning. That is something that is not okay. And I'm not going to teach you why or how that's not okay. Or I am not going to do some coaching with you on how to not be racist. That's on you. And I expect it of you, and I don't have to give you further explanation or further coaching. Does that help clarify? Okay, so the actual structure. You've spent your night stewing over this. You've spent your night planning what you're going to say, right? And you can do that for the first two pieces, but not the rest. And now you're actually in the room with the person. One of the most helpful, I really like the acknowledge, anchor, ask approach. Some of you that have been to my webinar on calling people out on bad behaviors in like real time in public, sort of being an active bystander, we use the acknowledge, anchor, ask, the AAA. And it's effectively the same in this conversation. All right, we're just going a bit deeper. We're not trying to get it all out in one sentence because we're in a big team meeting full of people. But what we're trying to do, acknowledge the behavior. Hey, this has been happening. We need to be specific. If you say the words always, never, everyone, no one, you're already not being specific, okay? Because if you say, oh, you're always late to work, they're just going to come around with Oh, well, last Tuesday I was on time. All right. Everybody else does this. Oh, no, such and such, I saw her not do it the other day. Okay, so we can't use absolutes. We have to be, 5 days out of the last 7 shifts you have been late to work. Or last Tuesday at such and such in that meeting, you said X. Or there have been 3 incidences that I have seen this week where you were rude to a customer. Okay, you have to be specific. You don't have to attach judgment to it. There's sort of trying to be neutral language, like this happened rather than this happened and it was bad. Okay, we're neutral, but we're specific. Exactly what happened, because most of your argy-bargy, if it's going to go off track early, it's when they have exceptions to your rule, which is why we don't give them exceptions. We don't give them the opportunity to go, oh, but sometimes I'm fine, or but this other person does it. We're just going, this is the behavior, or this is the thing you didn't do on these 3 occasions. Yeah, neutral, specific, acknowledge the thing. Next, we anchor it. Why does that matter? Why should anybody care? Why is it important that you're on time? Clearly, we can say that. Well, everybody else is impacted and the day starts late. Or why is it important that we are kind to our customers? Maybe that reflects our values, and our strong values are XYZ for customer-centric behavior. Maybe, you hurried the patient care, or, these sorts of things. Why does that matter? If you can tie it back to company values, company policies, that sort of stuff really helps, but also just impact on the team. What does that mean for everybody else? Or what does that mean for somebody's experience of your workplace? So we anchor, these are our values, because this is the line you're holding, right? That anchor is the line where we're saying, if you're late, everybody else suffers. If you're rude to customers, we won't have customers. All right, this is the line. All right, and then this next phase, this is where we have to be very finite and very careful to genuinely invite their perspective. But remember, we're holding the line. So this is where that nuance is, okay? You do want to give them the opportunity to say their piece. You do want to invite, what are your feelings about that? Tell me about that. What's happening for you? What's going on for you? And you have to listen, right? You can't just be ready to brush it off because you've already planned what you're going to say in step 4 and 5. All right, you've said your piece now. That's the piece that you can script and practice in front of the mirror if you're nervous. But from here on in, you've actually got to have a conversation with this person, right? So what is their perspective? Why are they late? What don't they agree with? And they will try to give you all sorts of things, all right? But cap it, all right? Let them talk. Don't interrupt. Don't defend, because we're not winning here. We're not here to win. We're here to hold a line. So all we're going to do is let them talk and go, oh, okay, I didn't know that. Oh, I can see you're really overworked. Oh, I can see you're overwhelmed. Oh, I can see that you must be struggling with the daycare drop-offs in the morning. Right? Now we close that loop. Okay. And we go back to holding the line. Thank you. And all of those things I said before about lines that hold the line, this is where we pull them out. Okay. So, wow, that does sound like an interesting thing that maybe I haven't been aware of. I would love for you to book a meeting with me to talk about that so we can really get to the bottom of it. But today I want to talk about the expectations for this behavior. All right. You've heard them. You validate. I hear you. I care. But today we're talking about this, and this is where you come back to your anchor effectively. The problem is, if we keep behaving like that, we're not going to have any customers left. Problem is, that puts patient safety at risk. The problem is, your team members really need your help. Okay, so I expect from here on in, blah. And then the last step is really, really helpful. A lot of the time, what we tend to do is be like, this is what I expect you, So we do the expectation. You're allowed to have your expectation. You're the boss. You don't have to negotiate on the expectation. But step 5, if you can, if you feel comfortable to do it, and sometimes it does depend a tiny bit on the compliance level or frustration level of the person you're talking to. But the best possible way to do this is to plan together how you're going to close the gap between your expectation and what they're doing currently. So get them to agree. Okay, well, I'm going to do it. Oh, I'd like to do training. I'd like to do mentoring with this. I'd like for this, to be shifted. Or maybe we're going to change your shift so you're on the later shift every day so that the daycare drop-off can be accommodated. Let's work together to come up. You're not moving on the expectation. This is their behavior. How do we close the gap? You can use that language, right? And you're asking them for what are they going to do? Obviously, some people are better than others at coming up with those solutions. So you might have to have some pre-planned in your back pocket, but don't pull out those ones in your back pocket unless that person is struggling. Because a solution that they come up with, that they are bought into, they're going to be substantially more likely to do than one that you just shoved at them and said, I expect you to do this. I expect you to go to that training. I expect you to spend time with this person to get some mentoring. If they have asked for it, if they have told you they want it, they're going to be much more committed to doing. All right. So keep some ideas in your back pocket. But if you can prompt them to come up with those ideas, you're going to be a lot more successful at getting buy-in with them. Does that make sense? So there's your 5 steps. We acknowledge, we anchor it in the why does it matter, we invite their perspective, and then we close that section, come back to the expectation, and how do we bridge the gap between my expectation and where you are right now? Cool. Now, the one other thing I did want to touch on, remember I mentioned moral mistakes versus technical mistakes, okay? And, technical mistakes, if somebody wants to change and the thing isn't life-threatening, I'll coach them for quite a long time. Moral mistakes, I jump on like a rash. I have zero tolerance for moral mistakes. I do want to talk about technical mistakes because I've just said to you that I think that difference between psychological safety and discomfort is being lost a little bit in the workplace. But here's where psychological safety matters, right? I've been in charge of a clinic when a nurse did unfortunately kill a patient and potassium chloride was administered instead of sodium chloride and the patient arrested and people wanted her head. And you can see why people wanted her head. It was just, they're different products. The doctor had asked for one product, she had given a different product. And, obviously we did try resuscitation and we're unsuccessful. And there's 2 different ways you can go in this sorts of situation, right? You could do what the family wanted. And in fact, some of her colleagues wanted and thought that she should be fired and taken to the board. The truth is she did end up at the board, but the truth is we defended her to the hilt, all right? And we had her back. And there's a couple of reasons for this, right? Firstly, we have to think about what is the purpose of your performance management. The purpose of your performance management should be to ensure that mistake doesn't happen again, right? There was nothing I can do to this person that is going to make them less likely to make that same mistake again. There is absolutely no punishment in the world that is going to change her likelihood to do that again. This is never happening again for this person, right? And so taking her down formal proceedings line, she did end up at the board, but like I said, our decision was this was a mistake. As the animal was arresting, she knew something was off and she went to the rubbish bin and she pulled out the bag and immediately came to us and said, I think I did this. Now, in that situation, we weren't able to get the patient back. But what we don't want is a scenario where somebody else makes a mistake in the future and we could have gotten the patient back, but they chose not to tell us. Okay. She has come to us. She's told us the truth immediately. And she worked with us over the next few weeks to try to come up with a way to make sure this stuff never happens again. Now, as it turns out, we were dumb. We had our potassium chloride and our sodium chloride in the same goddamn drawer, right? Stupid systems error that set people up for failure when you're in a hurry, when you're stressed, when you're tired. So we put them in different drawers and we put the big orange labels on the potassium chloride, right? She worked with us, she debriefed with us, she owned her mistake. So there was no purpose to formal proceedings. And what does it say to the rest of the team? Does it say we've got your back? If you work with us, if you are safe to come to us with a mistake, we will keep you safe? Or does it say if you make a mistake, we'll hang you out to dry, you better hide it? So difficult conversations need to be had. There's no doubt about it. But how you begin a difficult conversation for a technical mistake versus a moral mistake can be quite different. All right. And that level of clarity to start with around my expectation of you is that you work with us to make sure this sort of stuff doesn't happen again. Now, if on the other hand, that nurse had been like, oh, yeah, whatever. Oh, yeah, it wasn't my fault. You guys should have done something differently. If there'd been zero accountability, remember when I'm willing to coach versus when I put them on a PIP, do they want to change? All right. So that's just a really interesting, I think, overlooked differentiation between what is a mistake and what requires performance management versus support. Last but not least, guys, I do want to put a bit more Brene Brown in there because this is the thing that I hear a lot from particularly young leaders that I coach, that they're really struggling with those deflections and when people are getting upset and when people think you're the bad guy because of the conversations you've had to have and the level of emotional turmoil that that's causing for our leaders. And remember that one of my primary aims of my business is to keep leaders leading. We're missing this. All right. So the Brene Brown quote for those listening along is when you hold someone accountable for hurtful behaviors and they feel shame, that's not the same as shaming someone. I am responsible for holding you accountable in a respectful and productive way. I am not responsible for your emotional reaction to that accountability. I cannot stress this enough. When people do go off the rails, when people do throw a chair through the window in a performance review, I've also been in situations where we've had difficult conversations and that person has gone home and written on social media that they think the world would be better off if they weren't in it. And we've had to deal with the fallout of those things. I understand how much the emotional turmoil of this stuff hurts, but it's actually not your responsibility. You need to be respectful, you need to be kind, but that doesn't mean you can't hold the line and you can't be clear in your kindness. If this sort of stuff is the stuff that's helped you, if you're feeling like this is the stuff you wish somebody had talked to you at the beginning of your journey rather than, your leadership training was 20 minutes with the P&L. This is the sort of stuff I do for a living. I have a mastermind that literally starts in 10 days. So I've got one for veterinary, so people leadership for animal people and people leadership for healthcare people, two different masterminds, though they do both start the same week. Just a group with people just like you, the exact same, this sort of stuff. This is one of the modules that we dive a bit deeper and we do a lot of you guys practicing it and coming back with troubleshooting. We have unlimited chat support. So if you're about to go into one of these conversations, how would you guys do this? What do you guys think? Oh my God, that went terribly. Why did it go wrong? What do I do about it now? How do I bring it back from the brink? We've got 6 sessions over 6 months, all right? They're half days, they're chunky sessions. We get really nitty gritty into stuff. But then in between those sessions, you've also got drop-in hours where you can just come and ask me anything that suits you. I will just sit on the computer and there's no structure, but whatever you want to talk about, we talk about if you need to. And effectively, you're with other leaders. And this is the thing that, when I talk about keeping leaders leading, the lack of community, the lack of connectedness, the lack of these are your people that you can bounce off, that you can share your challenges with, that you can be a part of something. That's a huge part of improving our own well-being as leaders. All right. So creating that network of people who get it is one of the best parts of this, is that you walk away from the 6 months with these kind of lifelong cheerleaders. And because it closes in 10 days, well, it starts in 10 days, it closes next week. So for the next 48 hours, if you guys that have been here or are watching this video in the next 24 hours want a discount, feel free. There's a code on the bottom there, webinar 20%. There's some QR codes you can scan that you can check out more about the veterinary and shelter one or the healthcare and community services one. So totally just there if you want it. This is the sort of stuff we do. As you can probably tell right now, I'm pretty down to earth. Believe in just giving you actual useful how to do stuff tips rather than academic mumbo jumbo. Here's this model and here's this theory. Let's just do stuff, right? And ideally try to enjoy our jobs a bit more while we're there. So we've got some time for questions, which is a miracle. Normally I talk way too long and there's never any time for questions. If anybody has any questions, feel free to chuck them in. Oh, hi, Sam. Yes. Yep, it closes on, well, applications. So we take applications up until a week before close. So that's Tuesday for the people leadership for animal people, Thursday for the healthcare people. So it's open for another week, but the discount code's for the next 48 hours. Yep. Sarah, what did I do in the situation of the Facebook post? Look, that was messy. There's no doubt about it. I don't have the perfect answers for this. Like you, most stuff when it's new, you make it up the best you can as you go. In that particular situation, this particular person had done something quite similar before. So we did effectively all of the things that we could. We contacted her next of kin on our files. When we next saw her, we talked about EAP and our providers. We talked about what we could do to support her better. We talked about what we could do to help her through it. This particular individual didn't show up for all of the PIP meetings, just was sick every single day that we rebooked one. And so in the end, once we'd had 6 episodes of missing PIP meetings, we effectively sent an email saying, we want to accommodate you however you can. Please let us know how we can accommodate making this as safe for you as possible if you'd like to bring support people. But if you fail to present for the next scheduled meeting that you've agreed to, we will consider that abandonment of duties. So it wasn't nice. We did involve her next of kin. And, luckily we were in a situation where we had a really supportive workplace and she was very good friends with a lot of her colleagues who knew what was happening because she felt the need to tell them, not because we did. And so we were able to ask a couple of those people to be that bridge and to help ensure that she was safe. But it is really messy and it does really weigh on you. There's no avoiding that, I'm afraid. No other questions today? No? Okay, great. Well, you know where I am. You know how to get a hold of me. Reply to any of the emails that you've got about this, and I will send around a recording in the next 24 hours. Thank you for spending some time with me, and I hope that that helps you have some difficult conversations over the next little while. You're welcome, Bernadette. Have a great day.